Hi everyone, Miss Silla here, Learn to Grow. I hope that you guys are having a great weekend. So today I'm going to go over vegetables to plant in August. And these can be planted in zones 3 to 9. Now if it's still a little too hot, you can wait till towards the end of the month. Now for a warmer climate, some of these cool weather crops might have to wait till you're closer to fall and or in the winter months. So I'm going to go over, I have a list here, but first of all, before you start planting, make sure to prepare your soil. Add some organic matter such as compost, worm castings. For in-ground beds that have been established, you can add about an inch of compost or even half an inch layer of worm castings. And for new garden beds, you might want to add a little bit more of compost, generally about at least 3 inches of compost, and you can work that into the soil. And also I will link a video below on how to prepare your garden beds just by simply adding compost or worm castings. So make sure to check that out. So I'll be going over leafy greens first, and I have a list here. So the first one is leaf lettuce, and leaf lettuces can be harvested within 45 to 55 days of sowing, or you can harvest baby greens within 30 days. The next one is spinach, and spinach can be harvested within 45 days after seeding or after 30 days for the baby greens. So also want to keep in mind that these leafy greens, actually almost all of them, can be harvested within 30 days after seeding for the baby greens. I should have mentioned that earlier. But the next three are going to be Bok Choy, Tatsoi, and Arugula. And all these three can also be harvested within 40 to 45 days. Now for the dwarf Tatsoi variety can be harvested within 25 days after seeding. They mature a little quicker than the regular size Tatsoi. And let's see, I also have sorrel in the list here, and sorrel takes about 60 days to mature, although again harvest it for the baby greens, but also it's a perennial green, so once you plant it, they'll come back year after year, and I believe they are hardy to zones 5, at least 5 to 8. So sorrel's a great perennial crop to add to your perennial garden or vegetable gardens. And next ones, I also have Mizuna. Is another one of the brassica family, same family as the Bok Choy and Kale. So it's a mustard green, and those can be harvested in about 45 days. They mature around that time. And chard is another one. I love chard because it's a great alternative or substitute to spinach, and it takes about 55 to 60 days to mature, and again harvested for baby greens within a month. But the reason why I love growing it is because you can grow it all season long. It can tolerate heat, and it can also tolerate some cold, all the way down to I believe 28 degrees Fahrenheit, so a little bit of hard frost. So I think chard is a great crop to grow, and I love growing the rainbow chard, the brightly colored stalks. They are so beautiful, and again it tastes a little bit like spinach, so you can prepare it like spinach. You can eat it raw in your salad or stir fry it, or even put some in your scrambled eggs. Okay, so the next ones I'm going to go over some root crops. So I've got, let's see, I've got 4 root crops in here. So radish, harvested within about 25 to 35 days depending on variety. And turnip, about 45 to 60 days after seeding. Beets are great because you can actually harvest the leafy tops. So you've got the leafy greens and also the root crop. And beets can be harvested within 55 to 70 days depending on variety. And lastly, for the root crops, I also have carrots. And carrots also, you can eat the tops as well. And they mature in about 70 to 80 days, or you can harvest the baby carrots earlier on, maybe after 50 to 60 days. But also what's great about beets and carrots is that you can overwinter them. You can leave them in the ground throughout the fall and winter months and harvest as needed. And I know some of you guys mulch them, which is a great idea, to insulate them in the ground, and you just harvest them as you need them. Now, the other 4, I'm actually going to sow some with you today. So I've got bush beans. You can also sow some peas, summer squash, and cucumbers. The reason why is because these mature pretty early on, so the bush beans can be harvested within about 55 to 65 days, cucumbers 60 to 70 days, and summer squash about 45 to 55 days depending on variety. So you might want to sow these as soon as possible. So if you can get this done within this week, would be great, so that way you can get a harvest before fall. And the peas, I'm going to wait to sow it. It's going to be pretty hot this week, so I might sow them next week, and I also have to clear some of the trellises anyway. So I'm going to be starting these in 1-gallon starter pots, and I'll be transplanting them into the garden as soon as they are ready because I still have to get some cleaning up done. So I'm going to get those garden beds prepared, and when these plants are about a couple weeks to 3 weeks old, I'll go ahead and transplant them into their permanent home. So the reason why I'm sowing them into these 1-gallon pots is that I won't have to transplant them as often. In fact, I can just let them grow in these pots till they're about maybe 4 to 6 inches tall, and then I can separate them and then transplant them directly into the garden. So we're going to go ahead and sow some of these Blue Lake bush beans. So let me tilt the camera so you can see. Seed depth should be about 2 to 3 times the width of your seed, so the beans can be buried about 1 inch deep. So what I usually do is just push them down, just like that. So I'll sow so I'm going to sow 6 beans in this pot. Boop. Okay, and then just press it down. We'll do another one here. And now the scallop patty pan squash. So when you're starting your seeds, make sure to use a potting mix or a seed starter mix, okay? Don't use the soil from the ground. You want to make sure that your soil drains well and it does not become compacted or it's too clayey, especially when you're starting seeds in containers. So these are the patty pan squash seeds, and I'll go ahead and start 6 seeds in here. Now sometimes seeds won't always germinate, so I always sow more. One in the middle. Start some of these Market More 76 cucumbers. I bought the seeds last year, so this should still be okay. This one says it matures in about 66 days. So these are a little bit smaller than the beans and the squash seeds, so I'll bury these about 1/2 inch. And make sure to water them in, keep the soil moist so that they germinate. If your first frost date is approaching within the next 5 to 6 weeks, it's a good idea to plant warm crops from starts, such as squash, beans, and or cucumbers. That way they will produce for you before they are killed by the frost. Another crop to add is cilantro. It actually prefers cooler weather between 50 and 75 degrees Fahrenheit and will also tolerate temperatures down to 10 degrees. Lastly, kale. If you have about 8 weeks before your first frost date, you can still start them from seeds. If you have less than 8 weeks, it's a good idea to plant them from starts. Kale matures between 55 to 75 days depending on variety. It's also a great fall and winter crop as it can tolerate temperatures down to about 15 degrees Fahrenheit. Remember, the days are getting shorter, so it's best to plant your crops in full sun if you can. At least 6 hours or more is always better. All right, everyone, make sure to get those seeds directly sown or start some indoors under grow lights, especially for the cool weather crops, or you can also start them in the shade, an area where it gets afternoon shade. So I hope that you guys find this video helpful and enjoyed it as well. And if you did, please give it a thumbs up, and also remember to hit that notification bell so you don't miss a video. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful day and happy gardening.